Okay, so hey guys, Paul here. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the power of field nukes, board wipe cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, and why it's kind of fascinating to see that we've gotten so many of them back. This, of course, I've got my little playlist of images here, includes cards like Raigeki, cards like Harpie's Feather Duster, Lightning Storm, and even Evenly Matched. And I'll also go over a couple of sort of related cards that in some ways outshine these cards, in some ways change the dynamic with them, all that stuff. So, yeah. First and foremost, before we kind of get into the cards themselves, it's like the idea of a board nuke in Yu-Gi-Oh has always been, it's always been something that's like scary and feels maybe unbalanced, right? You are winning the duel, and then like suddenly your opponent uses Dark Hole or Raigeki or whatever, and it just nukes your board for free. It feels almost unfair, at least if we're talking about it like on a base level. Now, that said, in Yu-Gi-Oh these days, I think the reason we've seen a lot of these cards come back is really just because so many monsters resist them in some way or another. Either you've got monsters that can't be destroyed by card effects, or you've got monsters that want to be destroyed by card effects. So like they'll get some effect when they go to the graveyard, or like, DPE literally just will come back, or whatever. Or they can actually just outright negate these cards. In fact, if you're playing like a going second deck, you're probably used to the idea of, your Lightning Storm or your Raigeki really just being bait. Not actually, intending for it to fully resolve, but rather just that it's like something that you can play because you know that your opponent will have to at least do something about it. But the reason I wanted to talk about these is because recently Raigeki went to 3, not actually on the last ban list, but Raigeki did go to 3 fairly recently, and when I saw this, I was kind of like flabbergasted. $5 word there. So the reason why is because like we have Lightning Storm available to us, and it destroys like all your opponent's face-up attack position monsters, but it's got like a couple of restrictions. You have to have, I can just bring it up. You have to control no face-up cards, so it means like it kind of has to be like the first thing you activate on your turn usually, and mid-duel it's not really as helpful. Also though, it only destroys attack position monsters, so a common counterplay for Lightning Storm is just that you make your board, like when you're going first, you make your board and you make your strongest monsters in defense position. This is, to protect against Lightning Storm, and it usually works out because most powerful boss monsters still have comparably strong defense, so it's hard for your opponent to swing over them. They still have to like play through their negations, and now you're making the Lightning Storm be like sort of dead for your opponent. But it was just crazy to me then that we got Raigeki of all things back and like at 3 now. So I think not a lot of people are playing this right now per se. I've seen it in some side decks, but I actually think that this card could be significantly stronger than people are, giving it credit for. I saw Triff actually, he, the Pendulum God himself, he was tweeting about how like this card and even Dark Hole can be really good today, and I was thinking about it, and it does kind of make sense. Yu-Gi-Oh's had a lot of periods of time where like it's all about making these huge omni-negate boards, like just full of like 3 or 4 negations, and that's certainly still true. I mean, there are definitely cards like, Baron de Fleur, who can just sort of omni-negate one time. And, don't get me wrong, there's others as well. Mechaba and stuff shows up. Plenty of decks can still make stuff like Borreload Savage Dragon. So I certainly don't want to suggest that like omni-negates are completely dead, but in many cases, we're seeing more boss monsters that just have effects that are kind of more disruptive than outright negating. So they might not actually be able to interact with Raigeki. So an example in like the Sword Soul deck might be Chi Zhao. That's their Synchro monster. I didn't prepare an image of it to show on screen, but basically it has a quick effect where it can negate a monster's effect in the field, which is great, and it certainly functions similarly to an Omni Negate, in that it can negate your starter monster. You normal summon your Alibur, your Alistair, or something like that, and they can negate it. Pretty simple. And effective, but that means that it does not actually have a way to deal with Raigeki. Other cards, like Apollosa, for instance, also can't really do a whole lot about Raigeki. It's only meant to really be able to negate monster effects. Even DPE, which is, a really strong card and people really like it and all that, but yes, it can come back if it gets Raigeki, but that does mean that it's just going to be off the field for the turn. So what I mean is, like, imagine your opponent has like Apollosa, DPE, and Yugioh, the Sword Soul monster in the field. I know this setup often because I play a lot of Master Duel, but this definitely applies to the TCG. If their opponent has those 3 cards in the field and you just go boom Raigeki, DPE won't be able to hit any of your cards. Yes, it's going to float for next turn, but their field's empty. And emptying the board is like that means you can kill them. You can oftentimes kill them in that same turn, and that then means that you don't have to worry about DPE if you win in the turn that you activate this. So, yeah, the next thing is Harpie's Feather Duster. This surprised me as well when it came back, especially because like this is the card that's been legal for a while and not Heavy Storm. Now I know that there's sort of like some discourse to be had about the fact that Heavy Storm can destroy your own spells and traps, which could sort of lead to some exploitable like combos and setups and things. So we got Harpie's Feather Duster. Still though, this is crazy to me. Not that I like disagree with it, but just crazy to me in that like this card just nukes your opponent's back row. Now it's handy to think about like how many premier decks are more monster focused, right? Combo decks don't usually run like lots of spells and traps. You'll see them every now and again. They might get set, or they'll just like set their Call by the Grave or something. But this is heavily just a check for the Eldritch decks. The decks like Trap Tricks, or if we were going a little bit further back in time, maybe Guru Control, Altergeists. There's sort of always a strongly trap-based deck in the metagame in some capacity. It just sort of, they find their way in and out. So Harpie's Feather Duster can be really effective against them, and it's just a difficult one for people to answer. It means that if they are running Solemn Judgment, they're sort of forced to use Solemn Judgment to protect their back row then and there. And I think it's cool that these cards exist, because I don't really like dealing with back row cards. I know that Konami limited Red Reboot actually, because I think they didn't want it and like Lightning Storm and everything all existing as a way of like being like an anti-back row agenda or something. So this is here. I like Harpie's Feather Duster's existence. It's funny that people, much like Raigeki, a lot of people don't really main deck this card. Like, more people main deck Duster than they do Raigeki, I think, but both really find a lot of attention in the side deck. And that's another like just interesting thing to think about, is the fact that like Harpie's Feather Duster and Raigeki, cards that were previously banned for just being as strong as they are now kind of just relegated to the side deck. It's certainly cool. I'm not like saying this is bad or good or whatever. It's just that it's interesting. Then we have Lightning Storm, a card that I'm very shocked can coexist with these cards. It's crazy to think that there's so many different ways of nuking your opponent's board, and they're all just like kind of legal. So you could be playing a deck, mainly a going second deck, that runs like 3 of this and 3 Raigeki. Would that be overkill? Yeah, probably. In the side deck though, I mean, like it's pretty cool. And I like that this card offers the versatility that it can be Feather Duster, or it can be like more or less a Raigeki if you want it to be. Like I said before, there's like counterplay to the card, people summoning things in defense. And the fact that you have to activate it like as sort of the first thing in your turn, or early in your turn before you play cards, means that, it's not always perfectly live all the time, but still, it's cool. Then there's Evenly Matched. At this point, I'm kind of just going through cards before I get to the sort of other side of this discussion. Evenly Matched doesn't see as much play these days, I think, as it has. It kind of goes like in and out. This is not like as much of a play and profit field nuke, and it leaves your opponent with a card, it banishes everything face down, has to activate at the end of the battle phase. You can use it from your hand, which is really cool. So like, if you're going second, you can be like, okay, I'm just going to enter battle, in battle, use this. This is a really cool card though. I like that it has a very different take on clearing the board. I think that the design is surprisingly, solid. I like cards that are strong, but like, and cause sort of some disagreement. I remember when this card released, people were like, oh my god, this card needs to be banned. It's so unfair. It can just banish everything face down. And there were people who wanted bans. Time passes, and people have kind of just gotten used to this card. But it's another really strong tool for a going second strategy, and so for that reason, I like it. All right. These cards are all great, and I've sort of given some reasons why like people would like them, or why they maybe wouldn't like them. But I think their biggest competition today is actually Dark Ruler No More and Forbidden Droplet. So first we'll talk about Dark Ruler No More, because it did come out sooner. So you might think that getting rid of, at least like on paper, getting rid of all your opponent's monsters would be way better than just negating their effects. Because why deal with like, oh, it negates the effects of all your opponent's monsters? I just want them all gone off the field. But as we discussed, many monsters can negate your Raigeki, or they can float, or whatever, all these different things. Maybe they're unaffected. The cool part about Dark Ruler No More is that it negates the effects of all your opponent's monsters, and they also cannot respond. So at least they can't respond with monster effects. So this means that they can't negate this card with their Baron de Fleur or their Borreload Savage Dragon, and that actually means that this card can be good for still allowing you to play while helping you lockpick your opponent's field. I think that that's really cool. I also think that the fact that it can kind of cut out certain floodgate style effects, like if, say, Thunder Dragon Colossus was legal, it is in Master Duel, that's kind of why it comes to mind for me as an example. That means that you can activate this card and then cut its effect off for the turn and still play. And if you'd had Raigeki instead, it would just be able to banish the Thunders and live. So, yeah. So I think this card and Forbidden Droplets kind of are filling the more modern niche of mass removal. They don't actually get rid of the cards, but they make it more easy for you to play around the cards. And because your opponent can't respond to these easily, at least, or in a practical way, it means that they will actually get the job done that they are intended to get done, as opposed to just being something to soak up a negation. Just to talk really briefly about Forbidden Droplets, I do think that this card's pretty well designed in my eyes. I know that there are people who say maybe it's not and it's too strong, but I don't mind it. I think the fact that it's a quick play spell makes it really versatile, and that's fun. The fact that it changes attack and defense and can be used in the battle phase or in the damage step is really cool. And that versatility is neat. I also like that while it can't, the whole fact that your opponent can't respond with certain types of cards based on what you send to activate it is really neat. So if you want your opponent to not be able to use traps in response, you have to send a trap with Forbidden Droplet, and so that's oftentimes something people don't really want to do. You can also activate a spell or a trap and then chain Forbidden Droplet to the activation of your own spell or trap, so that way you can send the thing you just activated. There's lots of cool interactions and just fun ways to play with this card that kind of challenge you to get creative and use your skills a little bit. So it's not just sort of a play and profit thing. And a really strong balancing aspect to this card that I sort of appreciate is that it is a neg in card economy. Now, yes, you could say the Dark Ruler No More is as well, because you just activate it and then it goes. It's sort of a neg 1. But Forbidden Droplet, in many cases, is going to be a neg 2 or 3 even. But it does make up for that in the flexibility and in the fact that not only are you negating effects and being hard to respond to, but also it lowers these monsters' attack and halves their attack, and that is pretty cool because it's unlike Dark Ruler No More, where maybe negating the effects of these of a Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, it's still 3,500 attack. This actually halves its attack, so swinging over it becomes easier as well. So I think that these cards are sort of the more modern incarnations of these cards. It's an interesting thing to think about. What do you guys think? How do you feel about mass removal in Yu-Gi-Oh? The idea that a board can be wiped at any time. Does it make it feel more scary to play? Does it feel like something that's actually a really good balancing mechanism? It's still crazy to me that these cards just exist and we aren't particularly concerned about them because we're really more so focusing our, I guess, complaints or dissatisfaction maybe with really strong combos or floodgate cards rather than these sorts of cards. Yeah, I don't know. Lots of thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And that's going to be it. So I guess I will see you guys in the next one. Fast turn.